What do you think the establishment fears most about people like yourself?
Us breaking through the veil of lies, asking questions, which ultimately leads me to one word, and that is discernment. They do not want us to have discernment, because when humans have discernment, they're able to be independent. And big government wants more power. They don't want independent people. And as we're realizing that discernment is a key value that we need to work on and demand and focus on, the establishment is freaking out. Because how do you establish discernment is by being awake, being aware, educating yourself, and asking a lot of questions. And people with power don't want that.
Yeah, because I mean, I see it from the perspective of, conservative. At least the way that I see is that what we fear is we want to keep our independent thinking. We don't want to be told, hey, we have to get this. We don't want to be told, hey, our kids need to read this. My baby sister needs to do this. Like, that's what we fear. But then when I look over here, I'm like, what really do they fear? Like, what at the core do they fear? And that's something that I've been like, I don't know, I've been questioning myself of like,
Well, think about it. It's the people with discernment who dared to ask during the COVID lockdowns, why are we being locked up? Why are we masking children? Why are we forced to vaccinate kids with a vaccine that may or may not work, but for an illness that does not affect children, right? It's people with discernment who ask those questions. It's people with discernment who ask, why are you transitioning children and allowing a child to make lifelong irrevocable damage to their bodies? These are the people with discernment who are asking those questions. I oftentimes think about the story, there's a story in the Old Testament about King David was passing away, and King Solomon was next to assume the throne. And so God came to King Solomon in the middle of the night during his dream. And he said, what would you like? I will grant you a wish. And King Solomon's answer was, God, give me wisdom and discernment. He did not ask for knowledge. He did not ask for wealth. He did not ask for anything more than wisdom and discernment. And that is because wisdom and discernment will give you everything you need in life. It will give you freedom. It will give you courage. It will give you good decision making. It will even bring you happiness, because when you are able to discern, you can, again, live your full sovereign life. You can have sovereignty over your own body, your community, your family, your country. And so, again, big government, the elite establishment, they don't want us to have wisdom and discernment, because they don't want us fighting against lockdowns. They don't want us asking questions about why is there literal food poison available to our children in schools, right? They don't want us asking questions. The questions are coming from the people with discernment.
yeah. And I would say, like, I mean, playing their side, you don't want that, because exactly what you said, because then you begin to question everything that the government says, and you say, well, why are they saying that? And I think what happens with that, and I at least this is what I see now, is like you kind of give fuel to the people that are free thinkers, that are, because maybe I'm wrong, maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, but if, at least what I'm seeing now the last 4 years, if the Democratic Party didn't get so radicalized, maybe it wouldn't have gotten to the point right now where it almost seems as if, you don't agree with me? Okay, we're not even going to entertain a conversation. There's no middle ground. You don't agree with me? You're on the complete other side, when it's like, well, maybe we have similar beliefs and we just want what's best for the country. You have a different way of getting there. I have a different way of getting there. But let's kind of meet in the middle. And I feel like that's not had nowadays. There's not people that, Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, sitting down and talking about. That's more so, well, look at what Trump did. Look, you see the recession that's happening. This is what, looking at every single thing and waiting for an opportunity to just create division instead of finding some sort of a middle ground, no?
Well, I think that some people have truly a Trump derangement syndrome, where it's not even about the message, it's about the messenger, and they don't even really want to hear the truth. They just want to get that gotcha moment of saying, you see,
Yep.
I told you Donald Trump is a Nazi. You see, I told you Donald Trump hates women. You see, and like all this, they have built an image in their head. And it's very, very difficult to convince a person that they were wrong about something, especially if they lose a lot of friends and money, if they admit that they're wrong about something. It might be the hardest thing to convince somebody to walk away from. And so certainly there's a lot of that. And I also think that people have been conditioned to believe certain things through our academia, through our culture, and it's difficult to cut those ties. But as you said, I do think the culture is changing because I think that people are living through truth. And so they can have the facade of lies through the media and through our education system, but ultimately the truth does hit the ground, right? You end up seeing what the economy looks like. You end up seeing what open borders lead to. You end up seeing what the chemical castration of children through the transgender movement does. You see what happens when you're trying to break down the family. And, you're a young guy. I'm sure you're seeing that even in dating, the breakdown of the male-female relationship has become a nightmare. I'm like, I thank God that I'm in my 40s, that I don't have to date these days, because I just feel like
Well, it makes it easier because then it sets apart.
You're
the
like
right
the
woman.
one normal guy.
You're seeing, you're like, okay,
Yeah.
you're set apart.
But this is what the left has done. They just create absolute chaos in every aspect of our lives. Every institution that we know to hold dear that works for us, whether the male and female relationship, the family unit, the community unit, the church, everything, they just create this absolute chaos. And so the truth hits the ground when you're living in this chaos. And eventually people are starting to wake up, hopefully not too late, because what the left will do is they'll create so much chaos and then they'll grab power. And oftentimes by the time people see that the chaos is actually a power grab for them, then the power has already been taken away, and it's very difficult to recover for that. And that's why they don't want us to have discernment, because discernment allows you to see what chaos is being created.
That was really powerful. It takes me to like two quotes. I was like, when I was in high school, I was like, from sophomore to like senior year, all I did was read Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway's annual reports and like everything. There was two things that stick out to me. He said, number one, you'll see who's naked when the tide goes down. Mm-hmm. And then that goes to what you're saying about the power. When people understand, okay, they have power from the chaos. That's why they want that.
That's how they have it.
And then number two is like, he was talking about the stock market, but I think in markets in general, this can apply in everyday living, politics, that, in the short term, the stock market is a voting machine. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. I think you see that now where, Trump now with tariffs, that's the talk of the town. He's like, well, this is ruining the economy. But as somebody that's looking from a business perspective, as someone that's in entrepreneurship, I think this is like a long-term play. And he's willing and accepting the heat right now because he understands in the next 2-3 years, it's going to be a whole different, situation. But what is your vision of what America should look like?
As much freedom as possible. I think that it's in our DNA. It's why we're the only country in the world that truly fights for freedom. Truly, it's in our DNA. Many other countries will fall into, look at the UK. They'll fall into this supposed dream that there'll be absolute utopia if you allow the government to take care of you. The American DNA reminds us that it's all upon us. It's by the people, for the people, and it's the people who are running the show. Mm-hmm. And it's actually up to Washington to work for us. Yep. It's their job that we hold them accountable for. And it is very, very unique in the American experiment, because most humans around the world, they want to just be taken care of. And Americans say, look, we don't need you to take care of us. We need you to let us live in liberty. And I think that is ultimately, liberty is the American dream, as much liberty as possible. Whenever the government comes and says, we will fix for you, we will take care of you, it really means we will take from you. Yeah. And the more we educate Americans to have an ear for that whenever you're being promised anything from the government, it means that the promise is that they will be actually taking something from you. The American dream will only remain alive if we're willing to put in the work to fight for freedom and demand freedom as the first and most important thing, even above safety. Freedom above safety, because that's how they trap us. They will say to us, no, give us a little bit of your freedom so that we can give you safety. But that never happens. Whenever we give up our freedom, we lose safety, we lose sovereignty, we lose the American dream. You want the American dream? You have to be willing to work hard. And the harder you work, the luckier you get. Just like that.
I love that. And that's why I love, especially now doing what I'm doing, I love that. I love that it's the market rewards those who work the hardest, who stay the most persistent, who are the most, I love that. Because if it was any other way, we'll live in a communist, everybody would have the same thing.
Right. And everybody is equally worse off when you have communism, right? And the American dream is this entrepreneurial spirit. Yep. We love working hard, not for the government, for our families. Yeah. We love innovating, not for the government, for our families. Yeah. And that is why America is so different and unique. You can't trap us by promising us more things. You can only get our support and our vote when you actually give us liberty.
That's a very powerful message, because I think we're seeing it now, at least me, maybe it's been happening for a long time. Now I'm just at the age where I'm politically inclined. I'm legally the first time I voted in this election. So I'm seeing it where it's like more people are realizing that. But I think that we're still ways to go, because again, I see it. And it's like, I talk with people that are hardcore left. I talk with Muslims. I talk with everybody that I may agree with, I may not agree with, because I think that's important. And on top of freedom, what comes with freedom is a freedom of speech. And I think that is like the essence of America. And I got reminded of something when you were talking about that there was an interview you did with PBD, and you gave such a good analogy. I was like, damn, I really had to like stop and rewatch it. He was giving the analogy of, this was like a year and a half ago, maybe a couple months before election, where he was saying America, the Republicans and Democrats, is like a wife and husband getting divorced. And the attorneys are the Republicans and the Democrats. Or not the attorneys, the divorce attorneys, I think, or divorce lawyers, something like that. And he was saying, well, the attorney was telling the wife, well, listen, the agreements that the husband's setting up for the prenup, I've seen better, you could ask him for more. And then, the lawyer calls this the husband's lawyer, and then the husband goes, well, wife, why would you talk to a lawyer? We're here, you could just tell me. And they don't realize that the lawyers are on the same team. They're just trying to divide the people here. And that's the Republican Democrats, and this is the people of the United States of America. Do you think America is divorced right now?
Sometimes, giving that analogy that you use for husbands and wives, or just people in general, sometimes I wonder whether the left has borderline personality disorder, because if you actually look up what are the symptoms of borderline personality disorder, these are people who, first and foremost, always identify as victims. Sound familiar? The other thing is they create absolute chaos around issues that are oftentimes even not that big, but they just want to suck up all the air in the room to get all the attention. So they will do that. It's really not about the meeting of the minds. It's oftentimes about just having these absolute preposterous tantrums over things, which is, again, just borderline personality disorder. And I'm not sure they really want to come to the table about even things that they would clearly and should clearly agree on. I mean, you saw when the president gave his speech most recently and talked about the absolute basics, they wouldn't even stand up and applaud for the absolute basics of honoring the child that was a brain surgery survivor. They couldn't stand and applaud for this kid. And
they didn't stand for anything. No, they only stand for, what was it that they... There was something specific that they stood for. It was like the worst thing that they could have stood.
Did they stand up for protecting women in sports? I mean, even the governor of California agrees that you have to protect women in sports when competing against men.
And then he got demonized for that, for just saying that.
Oh, how dare he go against the borderline personality disorder of the left, right? And so it's really not about reasonableness. It's really about this emotional tantrum and not about truth either. So how do you come to the table with a movement that is really around, it's all about chaos. And that's why I say the left has borderline personality disorder. They thrive and survive off of chaos in the same way that those who struggle with that illness, that mental illness, it's just absolute chaos constantly. Victimization, victimhood, chaos, it's very difficult to have a meetings of the mind when it comes to that. I would not say that about liberals. I think that liberals might be a little weak sometimes. Maybe they'll be a little naive about what the left is doing. There is a huge difference in my mind between a liberal and a leftist, but I have come to realize that the left has borderline personality disorder.
What would you say the differences are between a liberal and a left?
I think liberals are naive. I think that they believe more in limited government, right, in liberalism and actually liberty.
Yeah.
And so I think it's different, where the left actually stands for chaos and for this victim bingo that we're seeing in our country. And we actually have a whole video that explains the difference between how a liberal thinks versus how a leftist thinks. So you can watch this on PragerU. The issue with many liberals is that I think they're naive about how dangerous the left is, and so they associate with the left because conservatives have been demonized in their view. That we're, I don't know, right-wing extremists, that we're homophobic, xenophobic, all of these ridiculous names that they throw at us.
Yeah, which is, it's a little bit, maybe not scary, because the only thing we should fear is God, but it is a little bit fearful when you see the people that are supposed to represent us, congressmen and women, and you see what happened, like a guy literally, I don't remember the congressman's name, but he's getting kicked out because of how, like when you see that, it's like, so then what is it? Is it that they don't want the greater good? All they care about is just being right, and they're so wrong that they don't care about the greater good?
Borderline personality disorder. Same.
But isn't that? But because that's the people that are supposed to represent us.
Correct, but they're more focused on getting the gotcha moment, or in their political agenda, or they're just so focused. It's narcissism. They're so focused on themselves. I don't believe they really care about America. Not with this kind of behavior. If you really cared about America, you would want to protect the borders. You would want to eradicate fentanyl from our children and from our streets. You would want to hold the Department of Education accountable for the $268 billion that they spent last year, and nothing to show for it except for decreasing numeracy, literacy rates, etc. Right? If you actually loved this country and you really cared about this country, you would not be okay with all these things. You would say, let's solve this. But these are political machines that just want more power and more attention for themselves. I don't think they care about us, which is why I think Americans are waking up and they're starting to ask questions.
Listen, this is not an ad. Matter of fact, you can skip 30 seconds if you want to, but all I want to say is, listen, you guys know I said last interview that I flew from Miami, from South Florida, to come here to PragerU's headquarters in LA to make this happen. And listen, if you're enjoying it up until this point, if you found value from it, if you're saying, wow, you know what, these are good questions, man, I like what Marissa, all I'm saying is hit the like button down below. And listen, if you're feeling extra generous, listen, there's very few people like out here in this world like me and you, people that are not afraid to talk about politics and religion, people that are unashamed of their beliefs, people that stand up for what is right. There's not many of us out here, okay? And we need to make sure that we are staying together, that we're staying tight. So with that, you could share this interview with somebody, a friend, a family, somebody you think needs to see this interview and needs to get the value from it. But without further ado, enjoy the rest of the interview. So what do you think is the change? Is the change just coming from the American people? Is it coming from, I don't know, because I think in the short term, I guess it will work, but long term, if this keeps being the way that politics is played, where it's not the greater good, I'm sticking with my side and I don't care about the people I'm representing. I feel like eventually something's going to happen where it just...
So to me, it's not about sides. To me, it's about sovereignty. Yeah. Whatever group of politicians is going to come to me and say to me that they're going to give me more, I'm going to look at them and I'm going to say to them, you are lying. You are lying to me. Because these promises are always empty. As Americans, we need to remember that in our DNA, we are chartered to demand freedom. And so whenever anybody wants to take that away from us, we need to run away from them. It's not about sides, it's about sovereignty. And so we just have to demand limited government. We have to remember that the bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. And it's not about the Republicans or the Democrats. Not for me. For me, it's about whatever politician is willing to prove to me that they're willing to shrink their power in order to receive my vote. That's how I look at it. And so if tomorrow the party switches and all the people in the Democratic Party are doging their funds, right, and removing all the fat and trimming all the bureaucracy and giving the power back to the public, then I'll say, welcome to America. That's how we're meant to live. But right now, many of us are saying that it's actually the Republicans who are shrinking the government. That's what it is for me. And by the way, we have to hold the government accountable, even if it's Republicans in office, including when it's Republicans in office. They better prove to us that the promise that they made to shrink the government and to minimize their power is a promise that is actually kept. If not, then they should lose our faith in them, and with that, our support.
Yeah, I want to pin that because I actually have a question about that. But I want to go back to something you said, which is victim, having a victim mentality. You speak a lot about that. I heard it at multiple different interviews on your show, like you talking against victimhood. What is the danger when America promotes a victim-like mentality?
I think the danger of anybody promoting a victim-like mentality is you end up becoming a victim. If you self-identify as a victim, then I can tell you exactly where you're going to end. You're going to end up as a victim. Look, life is really hard for everybody. Mm-hmm. It is really hard for everybody. It's harder for some, but it's still hard for everybody. And if you wake up every morning and you find the victim in yourself, I can guarantee you that you will find the victim in yourself every morning. If you wake up every morning and you find the victor in yourself, I can guarantee you that you will find victory by the end of the day. And it's as simple as that. Nobody gets a free ride in life, but you have free choice. And so take that power in you and make the choice, because your mind is the strongest superpower you will ever have. And if you can harness the power of your mind, and whenever God or the universe throws a challenge at you, and you look at that challenge and you say to yourself, I am going to take that, I'm going to learn from it, it's going to make me stronger, and it's going to be a stepping stone for me to do even better, then it will in fact become a stepping stone. Every entrepreneur I've ever met has said to me that they became stronger because they got kicked in the face every single day, and they woke up the following morning and they just kept going. And so you think you're going to win in this world without getting kicked in the face? Of course you're going to get kicked in the face. But when you get kicked in the face and you learn how to wipe it off and wake up the following day, then you know how to conquer anything that comes at you. So it's a problem when we teach children to find the victim in themselves, because you can't find both the victim in yourself and your victor in yourself at the same time. You have to make that choice. And so who do you want to be? Do you want to be the victim or do you want to be the victor? Because there is no life without getting kicked in the face. There isn't.
Actually, I saw this trend where, people on YouTube, they would ask ChatGPT something. If you were the devil, what would you do? And I asked that because, I know this is something that you speak out against. I said, you know what? If you were the devil, what would you do to stop me living on my purpose? What would you stop me from being a net positive to society? And the third thing I think it said was create a victim-like mentality. And then it explained it and it gave a really good explanation. It was like, because if you blame others for everything, you will never make progress. Yeah. You'll always stay right where you are. You will never move. If everything is always the other person's fault, you can never move forward. It's impossible to move forward because you will never learn, because you will never see and say, man, I did that wrong. Let me try this. You will never move. And I think it's like this in politics. It's like this in religion. It's like this as an entrepreneurship. But I think the danger to it is when people create a victim-like mentality and associate themselves with a party. And I'll explain what I mean. Like, I go to college, very liberal college, because they have a lot of protests going on there. They have. I'm
sure they love you there.
Yeah, they don't love me there. I actually did an event like 2 weeks before, I think, a live event, the Fight for America. It was with a couple of 3 big conservative speakers, and Antifa showed up, so that was also fun. But when I see, especially people my age, where I don't like to associate myself with a particular group just because I'm still learning, but at the time being, I'm like, okay, my philosophies and my thinking, I probably associate myself more with these people. But I think what's happening is that when I see people on campus that are my age, that, you know, they don't understand anything about any wars that are going on in Ukraine, Israel, anything. They don't understand anything about transgenders. But then they take a victim mentality and act as if, like, I don't know how to explain it properly, but they, lack of better words, but they stand up for a country when they live in this country. They're not from their country. They have no relatives there, but they're just like, no, but this is wrong. And it creates like a division, and it creates something that they don't even understand.
Yeah.
And the question I'm getting to is, how can my generation, become more politically educated instead of biased from something that they saw on social media, or because, you know what, everybody's standing with LGBTQ. Why don't we do an LGBTQ parade? Everybody's saying pro-Palestine. Why don't I get a pro-Palestine flag? And no relatives there, no nothing. I don't understand the history behind, but I'm just going to stand up for them.
Yeah. So there is a term that I think is really important for your generation to understand, and the term is called intersectionality. So what the left has created is this identity of intersectionality, that if you can find the victim within yourself, then you can identify with other key victim groups. And when you can identify with these other key victim groups, you become part of them and part of their community, and therefore you can create meaning through a joint cause. That's what intersectionality means. And so you bring up the example of, these really wealthy white kids, right, who they have a pretty damn good life, given that they're Americans and probably have, whatever it is that they need, their latte in their hand every morning from Starbucks, right? But they need to identify as a victim in order to fit into this broader intersectionality circle, right? And so they will find the victim in themselves. They'll say, oh, well, my parents were horrible to me, or maybe I have some issues with my sexuality. I'm one of the 69 genders. Forgive me if I didn't keep up with the numbers, but there's something in that.
There's 73.
73.
Yeah.
Okay. So, right. So you find that victim within yourself, and then you say, now that I won this victim of oppression Olympics, I can belong to another victim group. Well, which other victim group can I identify with? Well, maybe it's, the pro-Palestine victim group that, as you said, they know nothing about actually why the suffering is happening in Gaza or in the Middle East. Or maybe they identify with, the Black Lives Matter group, right? And so that's how they created this. People need meaning. They need to feel like they belong to something. Now, remember, the left has created so much chaos in our society where they have actually broken down the institutions that do bring us meaning. The couplehood, right? The relationships, they broke that. They broke the family unit. They're trying to break also the church. I mean, that's what they've been doing. They break the community, and so they provide an alternative meaning. And that intersectionality of the victim class, this victim community that you can now belong to as a young person, has become incredibly attractive because it fills up that God-sized hole in people's hearts with something else that they can feel like they're meant to do, they're meant to belong to. But the only way you can belong to this intersectionality group is if you're a victim yourself. And so you go find the victim within yourself, and then you identify with these groups that you really know nothing about, but you feel like you have to be an activist for them because, after all, they're your brothers and sisters through this oppression Olympics game.
Well, it's kind of goes to that quote where looking for all the right things in all the wrong places. Well,
in all the wrong places.
You want purpose. You want a sense of inclusion, but yet you look at it going to a parade that you know nothing about. Yeah, you go to holding up a flag where you know nothing about the backstory. Instead of what I think you find meaning in. So number one, in the Lord, in God. Number two, in your God-given purpose, right? What are you here to figure out? What you're here to do? Why are you with all your youth and all your time? The last thing you need to be worrying about is supporting something you have nothing about. Why not instead of with that same energy say, what's actually going on here? Let me read some books. Let me watch some history. whatever it may be. And I think the third thing is being a student, especially at my age, and not at a collegiate, but a student of life, and saying, man, I'm really interested in learning about this. Man, I want to get more politically educated. Man, I want to learn more about different religions. I think that's where meaning is found. And maybe it's part of the higher ups that have distorted that, kind of like what you're saying. So where now I see people my age on college campuses struggling to find meaning and struggling because that won't last.
Yes.
There's always going to be parades and there's always going to be something to, but eventually you're going to get caught up and you look down 40 years down the life and you're going to be like, what was I doing?
Well, and a lot of these people are completely transients in these kids' lives, right? That like they meet them at a protest, it's fun, they think that they're family, but meanwhile, their real relationships back in home are oftentimes broken or breaking, right? How involved are they with the actual structures and institutions that are everlasting in these kids' lives, right? What's the relationship like with the family, with their parents, with their grandparents? What's their relationship like with their local communities and their churches, right? Oftentimes, because there's such a vacuum over there, or maybe the vacuum is even created because they're so distracted with this obsession with these really meaningless causes with people who knows? I mean, these people are probably not going to be in your life for the rest of your life. And you're out there marching for them, not knowing half of what's going on or who these people really are. And the people who really would fill up your heart and be with you for the rest of your life are the people that you're leaving behind, because you're neglecting that for an absolute vape cause that you barely understand, but it seems like a fun cultural fad that makes you feel included. And by the way, the left knows that. That's why they prey on young people. They know that they'll go to young people and they'll create these cultural...
We're naive. We're not
You're naive.
educated.
You're
We're
looking
not...
for meaning. You want to be a bit of a rebel. Like, what? Spend time with your parents? That sounds so boring. I'm going to go live my own purpose in life. Let me cut the roots of the past because I'm the generation of the geniuses that know so
and we
much
know better. We know better.
You know so much better. Forget about that book that has been written 3,000 years, that has endured and given so much wisdom.
Yep.
You, the 19-year-old, know better about the political turmoil in the Middle East, even though you've never been there. You, the 19-year-old, you know better about what is right and wrong. You don't need to be educated about anything. Your college professor knows everything they need to know, and the kid sitting right next to you with the blue hair will give you all the happiness and issues in life. It's hard to hear these things because nobody wants a lecture about how you in fact do not, right? That takes a lot of humility to do. And you know what else it takes? Discernment. It takes discernment. How do you get wisdom and discernment? You get wisdom and discernment by having some honor and respect for what has come before you. Yeah. And we are teaching young people that they don't need to focus on what has come before them, right? They're going to be this genius generation that knows so much better. They don't need the Bible. They don't need the Constitution. They don't need anything that has endured. They're going to make it all up, right? Well, it is no wonder why this generation has no wisdom and discernment. And frankly, I guess some people call it common sense or critical thinking. You're not going to get common sense and critical thinking from your own self. You're going to get a lot of confusion from your own self, and you'll get peer pressure, and you'll get pulled into doing really silly things that can cause a lot of damage to society.
Yeah, which I will also play the other side because, me being in college and seeing that, I also see that, okay, we're also young. So I know eventually, I like to be an optimist. I would like to think, okay, they're also really young. I'm also really young. Especially, our brains aren't even fully developed. Every 5 years, people are going to change. So hopefully along the lines, people realize, oh, okay, well, maybe that was a little bit
Hopefully
crazy.
at that point, they didn't chemically and physically castrate themselves.
I hope that
With
would
the
not
trans
be.
movement.
I hope that would not be legal, for people
willing.
that are not of the right minds, and that's a whole different issue because I think that doesn't even fall on the hands of the people that are getting the transition, and more falls on the people that allowed for them to
these
get
doctors are evil, and the experts are evil too.
Yeah, it's a business. They only make money when they do, and they don't care about immorality. They don't care about. I bet you they have no fear of God. I bet you they have no ounce of. I don't care about this person's life. Because if you actually cared about a person's life, I don't think you would let them. And especially if it's a kid, especially.
Yeah.
Like, our brains aren't even developed.
Yeah.
Do you think the changing and the educating of the younger generation's mind, because I hold this true to my heart, I really do, because it kind of hurts me to a certain extent. Like, obviously, I have a lot going on and I care about that. But when I see people that are so young, and not even so young, like even, I hope this isn't too personal, but even my cousin, you know, when I had the event with the 3 conservatives, she sent me like 3 long paragraphs on Instagram. You should be disgraced of yourself. You're what's the problem with things. I was like, are you serious right now? Like, and it makes me sad where we've gotten to the point where there's so much, you know, like division. But you think that division will be taken out where maybe we're a little bit more educated on the roots of where we come from, on what America actually is, and why it was founded, and why it's such a special country?
Yeah, I think people who do good are going to be both loved and hated at the same amount. And so if you're planning to live your life walking with God and fighting against evil, you have to be prepared that you're going to be attacked. But you should also know that God loves you and God will reward you for that. But it's not going to come without the effort, right? That will happen. And so I'm sorry to hear about what happened with your family member.
Fine,
but I also think that some people will wake up and some people will not wake up. And that's just humanity, right? This is why it is so important for those of us who are awake to have the courage to speak the truth and do the right thing, because the alternative is that when good people don't fight, then evil actually wins. And we have to remember that every day. That if you see the truth and you've walked into the light, that it's actually even more incumbent upon you. It's even a bigger responsibility of yours to keep fighting for justice because you know the truth. And so if you save one life, it's worth it. If you save one life that went ahead and saved another life, then it's worth it. Mm-hmm. And so you have to focus on all the good that you can do and not despair, right? Despair is a sin because despair makes you give up on fighting for good, and good is worth fighting for, and that is going to be ultimately the battle of humanity forever. You're always going to have wickedness in humans. You're always going to have that. Humans are always going to try to draw us into chaos. It always happened. It will always happen. And then there's always going to be the fight for good. God is going to show up for us and bring us miracles. Yeah. And some of us are going to see the light, and we're going to dedicate our lives to do what we can to bring more people into the light. And that's just going to be the story of humanity for all time.
From the beginning, it's
never
going
to end. We're never going to have utopia. Yeah. We're never going to eradicate evil. It's part of the human condition. But we're always going to keep fighting for it. And there are always going to be the people who are going to keep fighting for it. There are always going to be the people who have that flame in them that are going to say, if I can just save one person, it's absolutely worth it. And it is.
I would like to think so. And I think that it compounds. And
yes.
You create then a community. And then you create a movement. And then the movement so I think it compounds. But go back to the thing that I pinned of talking about conservatives and talking about the Republicans nowadays, that, you know, if the Democrats were to be a little bit more rational, that you would automatically say, you know what, I agree with them, and you're not tied to a party, you're tied to, I forgot the exact word that you said. So you're not tied to a party, you're tied to...
freedom to ideas?
Yes.
Yes.
And what do you think...
Yeah, I want Republicans to know that they will lose me if they will go for a power grab, right? If they will take my liberties, they will lose me. And they should lose you too. And I want Democrats to know the same thing. You want America's support, you better not go for power grab. It is against the American DNA, and we will have none of that. And that is the price the Democrats have paid for going for such massive power grabs, because as Americans, we hate that. We hate that type of theft and corruption. And everybody is going to be held accountable for that, both the Republicans and the Democrats, if they come after our freedoms.
What do you think Republicans are doing wrong today?
You know, I think it's a little discombobulating to know exactly what they're doing today, because every day...
Well, not today, but I'm saying like in general, like now, like what's happening, like not today specifically, just today, like in right now times.
I can tell you what I hope to see more of, and there is a lot of action right now, which
yes.
I think is amazing. In the past, I would say Republicans need to get out of the ivory towers and stop having lunches and conversations about what ought to happen, and actually hit the ground running and start slushing things and giving the power back to the people. this has been a problem with Republicans for a long time. They were very good at board meetings and fundraisers and about making all kinds of plans, but not actually figuring out ways to bring it to the public. I think they're getting a lot better at it, at fighting for Americans and handing the liberties back to the people. I mean, we're seeing the Department of Education now being, slowly dismantled and giving the powers back to the states where they belong, and hopefully the states will give the powers back down to the localized communities and to the parents. The parents have been robbed of powers. We need to fight tooth and nail to maintain the power that belongs to us. And I think that has been an issue for Republicans for a long time. They didn't know how to make it into the culture. They didn't quite know how to speak to the public and galvanize the public and really explain that it's not even about us giving up our power, right? We've been robbed of our power, right? And so explaining these key issues has been incredibly important. I think we need to change the culture and the expectations around what the universities have become. I'm not sure they can be salvaged. I'm not sure that we should still insist on sending all our kids to colleges.
Why is that?
Because they are not producing for our society what it is that we need. They're training kids for jobs that do not exist anymore. Once upon a time, the idea was, let's send our kids to college so that at least they learn about their civic duties, their civic rights, and what it's like to be an American. They're not being taught what it's like to be an American. In most colleges these days, they're taught what it's like to hate Americans, right? It is terrible. Why are we paying so much money to send our kids to institutions that teach them to hate our own country? These institutions are not exactly helping our kids get the jobs of tomorrow. Many of these ridiculous degrees really don't help kids get any jobs. I mean, many of them graduate from college with a huge student loan, which then the public is forced to pay for, and then they become Uber drivers. You can become an Uber driver without going to college. And so I think we need to hold these colleges accountable and simply defund them or not give them funding if they're producing a product that is actually inferior to what we should expect.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of importance with that in education from every level. And it's actually Tiffany Justice. I don't know. I'm sure you know her.
Yeah, she's a good friend.
Has she been on the show? I know.
I've done so much stuff with Tiffany Justice. I feel like she's my
But on
sister.
Real Talk, has she been on?
Not yet. She
would be really.
Of course she would.
She would.
Yeah.
When we had our conversation, I loved her because she's raw. Like some people they try to think and process it and at least.
Yeah.
But she just straight from the hip. She's like, no, well, these people are corrupted. The Department of Education is completely sabotaged. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But the reason I say is because we had our interview and she was explaining why it's so important to start, from that and then up. Why it's so important from the education level to start with trying to fix that and because that's where everything gets brewed.
And by the way, I think that business owners, entrepreneurs in America should not focus on hiring students with college degrees specifically in areas that are not helpful for their jobs. Like, there are a lot of kids who are incredibly talented and successful, who go through trade schools, who actually have something to show for the number of years that they spent getting educated. And I think that we need to change the culture around that. I think we should celebrate, as entrepreneurs and business owners, we should celebrate degrees that we actually value in trades that actually bring a value to our society or to the company for which they're applying to work for, as opposed to these, fictitious degrees in silly subjects that don't really help anybody.
Yeah, I would say so. And I would say, I'm also not, maybe this is naive, this is my youth, but I'm also not completely opposed to college because I think everything is what you make of it. And I don't believe in a degree, but I do believe in making relationships, especially as an entrepreneur. Like when this person, there's going to be something, their parents are, and it's like, I think that is also the other value of college is making relationships and figuring yourself out too,
Yeah. Look, I think that some degrees are helpful, right?
Yeah.
If you want to become a physician, you want to become an attorney, you obviously have to study for the trade. And so I'm not saying that all degrees are useless to our society. Many of them are, but some of them are very helpful. And I'm not saying that all universities are useless to our society. There are some great universities who are teaching the classics and what it's like to have, civic virtue and morality, and those things are helpful to America to raise a society that is focused on morality. But I mean, it's almost laughable as I say this. How many universities do you think are raising kids that actually focus on morality and their civic duty and the understanding of America? It's just become, an absolute rarity these days.
PragerU University.
Yeah, PragerU, and there are some really good ones, and there are some great Christian ones that do that as well. But the vast majority, especially of the funding that we are disseminating to colleges, they're going to simply degrees and universities that actually hurt America and not help America. And to your point about going to college to make connections, I just don't know that that's necessarily
you don't need,
the only way to get
it.
connections, right?
But I'm saying that's another
but you can hit the ground running. You can, first of all, you can go to the military.
100%.
You can make connections there
100%.
and actually learn self-reliance and personal responsibility,
100%.
and maybe even see the world, which really gives you
get a little bit of discipline while you're there.
Yes, I mean, there are so many other ways to make connections and build connections and network outside of these institutions that will charge you upwards of $50,000 a year to, I don't know.
Yeah.
In some cases, I would say that it's better if you're inebriated for 4 years and just drunk during those 4 years of college than learn what it is that they're putting in your head. No, I don't want to say that like CNN is going to come out with, or the New York Times, CEO of PragerU says people should get drunk in college, which is probably happening anyway. But it's really disappointing to see what has happened to our colleges, and I think that we need to take that very, very seriously.
Yeah.
And one way to take it very seriously is for entrepreneurs and business owners like myself to say, you know what, those degrees are not that valuable to me. I actually care about the character of the person that I'm employing, their actual experience, their willingness to work hard, their moral virtues and values, and frankly, what it is that they're able to bring to the table. And whether they have the degree or not, to me, it doesn't really matter. To me, it really matters what it is that they can do to contribute to my company.
Yep.
And I bet you that there are many entrepreneurs out there who are saying it's better to get a kid these days who did not go to college than a kid who identifies in their victim bingo world than a kid who actually did.
Which sounds a lot like other things, like ESG, like DEI, like all these different things that focus more on a victim and focus more on your outward instead of merits.
Yeah, we don't want to hire people like that. I don't want to hire a person who has constantly been told for the last 4 years that they should find the victim in themselves, or that they deserve more because they need, more fairness. Like, who wants to hire that? I want to hire a go-getter who says to me, the harder I work, the luckier I get. That a go-getter who says, judge me based on my own merit, right? That's the person I want to hire. And it's just become so risky that when you inherit kids from a university who has been teaching them, like you said, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or has been teaching them ESG, this stuff, it's a real liability as an employer to look at these students and say, well, what am I getting here? Am I getting a victim or a victor? I want the victor to come work for me. And so I think that, as you're saying, the culture is waking up. I think entrepreneurs are starting to wake up and say, I don't want that kind of person in my building.
I agree with you. I can't thank you enough, because truly learning to enjoy these moments, because moments they're gone. They're here, then they're gone, and I'm learning to live in the moment, because especially on the entrepreneurship side, like, it's very easy to, I'm sure you've had a lot of these moments, like when you're getting there, when you're going through the grain and you're really like putting your neck out there, and it's kind of like you focus so much on getting there, you kind of forget the actual process. It's a little bit fun. It's fun flying 7 hours to make this happen. It's fun, like, making the question. It's fun, like, and I say this because I really do enjoy this, and I enjoyed our conversation. And last question, I want to ask you, when it's all said and done, you step away from PragerU, you don't strike me as the type of person to retire, but let's say, and in a world you retire, what do you want your message to be? when people think about you and remember you?
The most important thing I've done in my entire life is not build PragerU, not even employ 180 people, not dance with the President of the United States, though that was very cool. The most important thing I've ever done in my entire life is get married and give birth to children. And that is my message, because God gives you this gift to start a family and to have something that is truly yours forever. And for young people to not take that gift, it's just heartbreaking to me, because it's the thing that is yours forever. That is, it's creation. You get to create from nothing. You get to create. And so I think about my career, which is wonderful and really fun, and I get to do these incredible interviews, and it's meaningful to me. But nothing is as meaningful to me as raising a family, because it's my own.
I love that. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you.
If you guys made it to the end, okay, you guys are the real ones. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much, because I don't say this lightly, I truly do think we are going to be one of the leading platforms in 5-10 years, because number one, we're unashamed. Number two, we stand for the truth. And number three, we admire talking to people that, we may not agree with, people that we do agree with, having different, point of views, and not being so, oh, well, you believe this, well, I don't agree with you, and I'm just going to stay with. So I say all this to say that, guys, I appreciate you. You are what makes it possible. If nobody was viewing this, maybe I'll still be making interviews, but I want to keep going. So I thank you guys for watching this. And if you did enjoy it, all I ask is that you hit the like button, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and share with a friend that you think needs to watch this. But I can't say it enough, actually. Thank you, and I will see you on the next one.